Okay, it is live. Hello, everyone. Hope you are doing very, very well. I'm just going to make sure the audio is working. Yes, audio is working. Excellent.
And you can hear me well, right?
Yes, I can hear you. Seems like you can hear me, so this is really good. Well,
Excellent.
everyone, we have a very special guest today, who is
Gabriel Silva. I'm
Yes.
very special. Thank you. That's kind of you.
Yeah, and so the past couple of weeks, I've been trying to get some more people onto the channel. I find that I go through phases with my content, and actually, maybe this is a good place to start, Gabriel. Which is, do you guys say Gabriel, Gabriel? Like, how are you supposed to say your name?
You can say Gabriel, but you know, like, for instance, it's in Portuguese, it's Gabriel.
Gabriel.
But
okay.
often, for example, if I'm speaking French, I'll be like Gabriel,
Right.
and you know, but the pronunciation doesn't really matter to me.
Sounds good. Well, I guess this is maybe a good place to start. I find that when I make content, I go through different phases where sometimes I'll be making a lot of videos that are straight to the face with a camera. Sometimes it'll be I do a lot of interviews. Sometimes I feel like I go through different phases. Right now, it's been a little bit of an interview phase where I've been doing some more interviews on the channel with different people. Do you go through things like that with your online content as well?
Yes, and I've been going through the exact same thing, in fact, because I've been doing a ton of interviews recently, especially because I have 3 students right now that are learning. Well, actually, one Russian friend of mine, she's learning Portuguese. And so we've been doing videos. I think I've done maybe 5 videos with her already. And also I've been teaching some Portuguese to Lina Vasquez. I don't know if you know her. She's pretty awesome. She's a.
So you're teaching her Portuguese right now?
Yes. Well, she's mostly learning by herself, right? Because she's so skilled and she knows what she's doing. But like I'll teach her some stuff, and and she's progressing quite rapidly, which is quite impressive, and she can communicate quite well. And as well as I'm teaching, like, of course, I have like a lot more students, but basically these ones are the ones that I've been doing interviews with. I've been teaching how to learn 2 languages at the same time to this Brazilian doctor. Basically, she's like she's improving her English and she's learning Spanish. I'm a big fan of learning multiple languages at once. I don't know if you do the same. And so I've been basically trying to teach how I went about it, because I've done it a few different times in which, like, I went through periods of time in which I focused on 2 or more languages. And I learned basically German and French simultaneously.
Okay.
So I have like this alternation process basically that I went through. Then I did the same thing with Dutch and Italian later. And then, like, I kind of, then I went through phases in which I was just like dabbling in a bunch of languages at once, just for fun, just to see like how I would progress in all of them. And also because, like, whenever I start getting a little bit bored, I really try to like switch things around a bit, you know?
Yeah.
Let me ask you something. When you let's say you're focusing on a language.
Okay.
Right. Do you also feel like you go through phases in terms of motivation? Like, you're highly motivated, and then at times you feel like, oh, you know what? Like, I don't feel as motivated for whatever reason. Sometimes with me, it's like, oh, I feel like my progress has stalled a bit. Then I'm like, you know what? Or like the materials that I'm using are not as exciting as they once were. You know?
Right.
So then it kind of like, sometimes they go back to another language, then I vary things. So that's something that I normally do.
It definitely happens to me. And I don't know if it's a motivation thing or if it's just a priorities change thing, where sometimes I will be focusing really heavily on a language for whatever reason. Okay. And then my priorities will change at a later date, whether it's I want to focus on a different language, whether it's I want to focus more on work or focus more on whatever it is. Yeah. And then priorities change, and then I choose to not focus on it temporarily, and then I will go back when it makes sense to go back to it.
Yeah, I feel the same way too. It's linked to motivation, but like you said as well, it's about priorities for me as well. So, for instance, in the past 2 months, I've been not as focused on languages generally speaking, just because I've been putting out like a lot of content on my Brazilian YouTube. I've been dedicating myself more to my online courses and so on.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's interesting to see as well how much each language suffers, you know,
Yeah.
because I'm always trying to juggle all these different languages, and then even languages that I'm quite fluent in, like my accent will get worse, or my vocab, like I'll have to review a bit. But generally speaking, if I focus a bit more for like about like a week or so, then I get back into it really, and I get like confident
Mm-hmm.
again.
I
But
want to go back to something you said,
yeah,
which I found really interesting. You said that you are a big fan of learning multiple languages at the same time, and it's something you've done in the past successfully. And
yeah.
then you referred to an alternating strategy. What,
Mhm.
I guess, talk to us about what that strategy is, and what does that look like for you?
Okay, so I'll start with my first successful experience then, when I learned French and German at the same time, and it took me about 4 years to become fluent in both of them. And
Did you start them both at a beginner level?
roughly, yes, yeah, I was at a basically I had done like 3 months of German in Brazil, but I hadn't touched it in like several years. And my French was pretty mediocre. So they were
Okay.
both at a beginner
Lower
level,
level.
low, like a pretty low level. And and what triggered it was that I went to Paris when it was 2007. So it was 11 years ago. And the funny thing is that like going to Paris, because I had taken um, a couple of courses before, I was delusional, and I thought like, oh, hey, I'm gonna go there and I'm gonna be able to communicate. And when I started trying to speak to the cab driver that took us over to and we it's a horrible mistake. We took a taxi from the airport over to the hotel, which was like a fortune, which was so stupid. And I realized, holy smokes, I do not speak any French at all.
Right.
And I kind of fell in love with a few elements of the culture. Like I got really into like Napoleonic history because I went to Les Invalides, and I just like I got really into it, and I got really into French literature and so on. And then I started dating a German girl,
Mm-hmm.
and we were in a serious relationship for a long time. So I basically learned those two at the same time, essentially. And
Right.
what I did and what worked for me was that I would normally do like 70 to 80% of effort and time into one specific language. So like, whatever. I was more excited about French, I'd put more effort into French, and then 20 to 30% in German. Okay?
Okay.
And I would notice some progress in French, and I would feel like I'd be like lagging in German. I'd be like, you know what? I'm gonna go switch back to German now. And then I would
Right.
alternate these phases. And then I would focus 80% in German, 20% in French. So my German would kind of like catch up,
Mm-hmm.
and I would get like, I feel like, oh, you know what? I've made progress. And then I would switch back to French. And I kept like going that way until I got fluent in both of them,
See, that
which
makes
was,
sense to me because I know one thing that often happens when you're learning multiple languages is a lot of people try to balance it. They almost try to split their attention. It's almost like a good analogy would be that imagine if everybody has 100% potential attention. That's their attention span. And people try to go, let me split it 50-50.
mhm.
And they try to do that, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But then what happens is that you experience slow progress in both
I feel the
because
same way. I agree.
and then what happens is that if you feel slow progress in both, it becomes discouraging. and you feel like you're not really making any progress. And because your progress is slow in both, you don't really get to build any momentum. And so I feel like whenever you're studying languages in general, it's a good idea to have at least a primary focus, whether that means you're only studying one language at a time, or whether it means that you have one language that is your top focus. And so it's interesting because I was curious when you said that you've learned multiple languages at the same time. I was curious to see if you'd split your attention 50-50, or if it was something that you did, in your case, I guess 80-20, which makes a ton of sense to me. And I was just interested to see what your answer was.
No, fair enough. I fully agree with you. And whenever I did at points try to do 50-50, and it felt like I would gain no momentum in either of them, and then I realized I would actually use some of the inertia from just getting excited about something. Sometimes I would find like whatever French novel that I liked, and I'd be like, oh wow, I'm gonna like try to read this, and regardless of my level at the time, like when it started getting better and like really when I was able to like read more and so on, I would just get into that. And then, for example, like my girlfriend at the time, she would introduce me to like a German TV show that I really liked. So I started like focusing more on that. So sometimes it was just like I would always try to use my excitement regarding a specific tool, a specific technique, and then just like get really into it as well, which is like obviously super important. When you're really into it, it makes all the difference.
Do you think that tools are overrated?
Which tools? What do you mean?
Tools in general. I think, I guess where I'm coming at it with that question is a common question that I will see, or a common focus that I'll see many people focus on, is what's a really effective tool, or what's the best tool, as a stereotypical question. What's a really good program, course, teacher, etc. And for me personally, I find that we put too much time on the tools. We put too much time on, I think this is a good tool, this is the best tool, this one's really effective. And I think honestly, it's, yes, the tool's important, there's no question about it. How you study matters. I think what matters at least equally, but potentially more, is how you use that specific tool, and how you blend other tools with whatever tool you chose. So I'll give you an example. I like to listen to music in different languages. I enjoy it. Now, listening to music passively, which is what I do, is not actually a very effective method in my perspective. However, it would be more effective if I actually listened to songs, looked up some of the words I didn't know, and actually used it in a more active way, where I researched some of the lyrics, I looked into it, oh, that's what they're saying, okay, tried to use some of the words. That would be a heck of a lot more effective. Yeah. The problem is that I won't do that. As in, it doesn't feel like something that I would enjoy doing all of the time. And so what ends up happening is I listen to the same songs literally thousands of times, and eventually I do get something out of it. I eventually do. Yeah. Right? After I've listened to it 862 times, I go, oh, I finally caught that word. I know what that word was. Oh, cool. And then I feel excited. So the tool that I'm using is music, to listen to it passively. That's the strategy I've chosen. Yeah. Theoretically, not necessarily the best strategy, but it's something that I will actually do. Mm-hmm. And so that's where I'm coming at it for the question, is I wonder if sometimes we put too much emphasis on, oh, this is a really good strategy, and not enough emphasis on, well, what's a strategy you're actually going to use, and are you going to make that strategy work for you?
I fully agree with you, in fact. Just because especially beginner or like inexperienced language learners will often be like, oh, cool, you speak a bunch of languages, I'm gonna get Rosetta Stone for Spanish. You know, and for them, it's like, that's it. You get Rosetta Stone and you learn Spanish. But so there's a lot of focus on the two, or like, oh, I'll just get Duolingo and I'll learn a language with Duolingo. But every single tool, every single strategy will have severe limitations too.
Yes.
So, like, yeah, sure, you can learn a ton with Rosetta Stone, you can learn a ton with Duolingo, but if you I think that it's just so much more effective to find a right blend of tools, a right blend of strategies to progress.
And I think it's
Primarily,
sorry, I'll let you finish. Go
Norris,
ahead. Say your thing.
Norris,
Go ahead.
primarily, I go through phases. Like, for example, like when I used to focus a lot more on grammar back in the day. For French and German, I have books and books and books of German and French grammar. I did a ton of exercises. But for example, to learn Russian, which is the grammar is quite complex as well. I focused a lot less on grammar and a lot more on audio and text. So and of course, like you kind of like develop new strategies and new ways of learning and so on. So recently, I've been going through more of a phase of um, basically audio and text, partially because of Steve Kaufman's influence, because he's my
Hmm.
friend and he lives here in Vancouver,
Hmm.
and so I feel like it's a great tool, it's a great strategy, but incorporate a ton of different things too. I do memory associations, I do memory, the memory palace basically. I do space repetition, I do some shadowing as well. So I incorporate like all of these different things into the process as well. So the basic answer to your question is yes. I think that people do. Um, we overestimate the efficiency perhaps of specific tools. You know.
Yeah, totally. And I think it's interesting that came up is because there's a question in the live chat, which is what is the most efficient method to learn a new language in your opinion? That's one of the questions, and it's such a for me anyway. It's such an interesting question because number one, it's so dependent on the learner. There's going to be different things that work for different people. Number two, it's less about the most effective way and it's more about what are your options and trying out the different options. And that's my perspective, to look at what are the different options to learn a language, what are some of the different tools you can use, High Native, Duolingo, Rosetta Stone, shadowing, taking classes, private tutors, language exchanges, traveling abroad, intensive classes, on and on, listening to music, watching stuff with subtitles, and on and on and on and on and on. And okay, here's my 20 options. Out of those 20, okay, I don't want to take classes. I don't want to watch movies. Oh, I could use an app. Cool. There's one. Oh, I could use a textbook. Two. Cool. You pick out 2, 3, 4, and you figure out how you want that to look on a day-to-day basis. How many hours do you want to study? How many, whatever. And then adjusting as you go. I don't know if you align with that or if you have a different take on it, or maybe you do have a stronger perspective on what the most effective or what a really effective strategy is.
Well, I think I personally really like to say the most effective is what you like the most of the time, and what you feel like is giving you the most progress. Something that will be highly effective for somebody because they're so stoked about it will not be super effective for somebody else.
Totally.
And we also go through phases. Sometimes, for example, like at beginner levels, I find I really like Duolingo. I really like to start with Duolingo, and I go for it and I just like do the whole thing, the whole tree, and then I'm finished, and then I'm like, okay, wow, what do I do with it now? And I use these different strategies to try to actually learn the content, because just going through it once, like I'll retain nothing. I don't know if it's the same for you, but like I have to use all these strategies to actually like absorb the content and be able to use it. So it also depends on phases essentially. Then to get started, some tools will be very effective, some other ones won't be. For instance, text and audio, right? Like text and audio, I think it's just great, or text and video. But usually, when you're at a beginner level, that will intimidate you, depending on like the if it's just like if you get just a genuine conversation between
You mean
people.
text and audio in the sense of you have a audio from whatever, a song, a conversation, a movie, a podcast, whatever, and then you
Yeah,
have the text, like almost like subtitles, or like you have a transcription of the audio. Is that what you mean?
correct.
Okay, got it.
So, you know, normally I'll be using like a podcast or whatever, or if I'm a bit more advanced in the language, I'll just like go for often. I love listening to just literature. Like, for instance, I'm reading Anna Karenina in Italian with audio, just because like I like listening to the Italian, you know, and so it's great because it's just like if you're just listening to stuff, right, and you miss it, it's done if you don't have the text.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have the
Totally.
text, then you can like go back to it and like just like look at it, and you can study the text separately. You can use whatever combination thereof that you please. You can focus first on the text, then on the audio, or vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, so as for like the most effective strategy or program or whatever, I think it depends, like you said, like on a variety of factors. For
Mm-hmm.
different people, there will be different things, and also it will depend on their level, their
Mm-hmm.
goal, right? Their goal for the language. For instance, I remember this is so random, but I remember like we had a quick chat on the comment section of one of my videos a while back, like
Okay.
maybe a year ago or something.
Mm-hmm.
And you were talking about basically reading more in Mandarin,
Okay.
right? And you said like, yeah, I've been trying to focus less on. And you said like you didn't want to use pinyin so much, if I remember
Mm-hmm.
correctly, because you wanted
Okay.
to really sort of learn more of the characters.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was totally legitimate. But for example, like for me though, because I've always wanted to focus more, I was in no hurry to learn the Mandarin characters, and I still am not, like, although like I know a lot just because like but I rely still a lot on pinyin because I wanted to like I was more interested in reaching a conversational level in
Yeah.
Mandarin. So it's all
Totally.
about your goal, you know.
Yep.
So for me, for example, like back then, if someone has the same goal as I did, oh, I want to establish a conversational level in Mandarin, and specific tools that focus on reading and writing will be useless to them. You know what I mean?
Totally. Yeah.
So it totally depends on your goal
Yeah.
as
That's a
well.
very, very good point. Yeah. Very, very good point. No doubt. All right. Last thing we'll do on this interview here is a question from the live chat. It's in Portuguese, but I'll translate to English. How long have you been studying English? You basically have no accent.
So I started. This is like an interesting question because I was 10. I was 10 years old when I started learning English. When I was 16, I finished this course in Brazil, basically. And so I got
Mm-hmm.
like certified. It was just like, okay, I'm supposed to be fantastic in English now. I was advanced, right? Then I moved to Canada when I was 17. And upon moving to Canada, it was interesting because, I thought and compared to my other friends, my English was the best.
Right.
But I still had a lot of troubles communicating with people
Huh.
and understanding them. So I struggled, and I struggled after like 7 years of English. So so it took me like another, I would say, 2 years here in Canada to get really, really confident communicating. And I had like one very patient best friend whose other best friend was like a deaf guy. So he was very good at like teaching, and like he was very patient, like
Yeah.
with pronunciation and so on. So that really helped. And then eventually, of course, like I studying in university and so on, I um, I mastered English, I would say, but it took a while. And
Mm-hmm.
but I used to my general impression though was that I sucked at languages because it
Right.
took me so long to learn English, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And that drove me to pursue languages more aggressively.
So
And
when you thought you were not very good at it, that drove you to push more into it.
yeah, Well, a bit when I was like, let's say, when I was in my early 20s, and I was like, you know what? Wow, I suck at English. I want to learn. Will I also suck in German and French? Will it take
I
me like
see.
10 years? You know, will it
Yeah.
also take a decade to learn these languages? But
Yeah.
then it took a lot less time for me to become fluent in both of them simultaneously. And then, for example, like, so it took me 4 years to become fluent in German and French. And then the next languages were Dutch and Italian, and basically because they're, you know, Italian's close enough to Portuguese, Italian, and French, and Dutch is close enough to German that it took me only 1 year to become fluent in both of them.
Right.
Well,
Because they're similar. They share some similarities.
oh yeah, definitely.
Totally.
So, and Dutch is between English and German in many ways, although like it has a lot of random vocab that's exclusive to Dutch. There's a lot of similarities that you can like rely on which to learn. So it's a fun language.
Cool, man. Well, let's wrap that up here. Going for about 25, 26 minutes. We can wrap up there. As per usual, I've put Gabriel's social links in the video description below, so highly recommend that you guys go check those out. This is YouTube, there's Instagram, his Facebook is all there. Any parting words, Gabriel?
Let's do it again.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, we can definitely set it up. Well, let's end this live stream, and then we could figure out when we can do another one. Yeah, fun.
Sounds good.
Cool. All right, guys. See you later.
Cheers. It's been a pleasure.